there's some really big elections this week. There are entire state legislatures that are up. There are governor's mansions at stake. There are a lot of interesting ballot initiatives. And we wanted to focus in today in particular on my home state of Virginia, where the governor is not on the ballot. So that race is not happening. But obviously, we have Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin right now, who really is the face of the Republican Party in Virginia, who had that against the odds victory over Terry McAuliffe just a couple of years ago. And let's put this up on the screen. So the House and the Senate are up for grabs here. Right now, the Republicans have a narrow advantage in what's called the House of Delegates in Virginia, and Democrats have a narrow advantage in the state Senate. And what it looks like is probably Democrats have a decent path to holding on to the state Senate. Republicans have a decent path to holding on to the House of Delegates. And that state Senate is really critical in particular because they've been sort of like a bulwark against, whatever Glenn Youngkin wanted to do. And so they have stopped a lot of the legislation that he's been pushing forward. But the other piece of this, Saagar, that is really significant is Youngkin and the Republicans have decided to place a big bet on actually leaning into abortion messaging at a time when this issue has obviously been basically a complete disaster for Republicans. They pushed unsuccessfully earlier this year for a ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Measure was blocked, as I said, by the Democratic majority in the state Senate. But they have actually put money behind talking about this 15-week abortion ban. They believe this is an appealing sort of middle-of-the-road approach. And so rather than just trying not to talk about the issue whatsoever, they're actually leaning into it, which is part of what makes this election so interesting. That and the fact that Virginia is oftentimes, because of these weird off-year elections that we have, is oftentimes kind of a bellwether for what's coming down in terms of the presidential politics and the national politics as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we need to watch it really closely. I'm really curious, and I don't know what the hell Glenn is doing, because why would you make the election all about abortion, the single most animating thing
like
for liberals? Yeah, and also we are in Virginia, dude. This is the full of the Karens of Karens in Northern Virginia. These people crawl over broken glass to vote for abortion. It's like, what are you doing? I truly do not understand it. I did send you, though, one of these letters that I got in the mail. I've polled some of my friends. They also got it. We're calling it Glenn Bucks, where I'll read you a direct quote. If you filed for an income tax return in Virginia, here's what you get. You are receiving this rebate because Governor Glenn Youngkin recently signed a bill passed by the 2023 Virginia Assembly giving taxpayers who filed tax year 2022 returns and have a tax liability a rebate of up to $200 for an individual, up to $400 for a married couple filing jointly. They send that directly to your house with a check for $200 beneath it. So it's obviously a bribe, in order to vote for the Republicans. I'm not actually against it. It would be a better thing. From my investigation on where these Glenn Bucks came from, it appears that some of it was COVID money that was appropriated to the states, and they had extra. So what they decided to do is like, hey, let's just cut a check to everybody who's in the entire state. So congratulations to everybody who is a Virginia resident. Maybe that will have some effect, but yeah, I think that it was a colossal mistake to bet the House on abortion restrictions, again, in Virginia, in an off-year elections. I mean, I think Matt Iglesias has said this. He's like, many upper middle class Democrats have voting fetish. Like whenever it comes to special elections, they're like, there's nothing they love more than to vote. It's really like much more normal people who vote in presidential elections. Off-year already, you really have to be highly activated. And then these specials, or not special, these off-year ones, like in Virginia, the least amount of people often vote in those things. So anyway, this will be a bellwether, at least in that regard, for how animated people are whenever it comes to voting.
There's another piece that's interesting about this, which is they are also trying to reverse the Trump-era decline in Republicans voting early and by mail.
Yeah, right.
So they've made a real concerted effort here. This is, again, reading from the AP. They say they're hoping for a boost from major investment in an initiative aiming to overcome GOP skepticism about early and mail voting and get ballots banked before Election Day. An analysis by the nonpartisan Virginia Public Access Project found that 6 days out from the election, the share of early votes cast cast by likely Republican voters, because Virginia doesn't have registration by party, has increased more than 2 points from last year, while the GOP's share of mail votes is up by almost 4 percentage points. So it does appear like they were able to, grab back some of the early vote. And this matters a lot just in terms of organizing. I mean, you can imagine, like, if you've got your certain universe of voters that you're trying to turn out, if you've got this group that you can check off, like they already went and voted, you don't have to worry about them anymore, then you're able to focus on bringing out those people that are more difficult and get them to the polls and call them and knock on their door, send them a flyer, whatever your strategy there is. So this was a tremendous advantage for Democrats in 2020 in particular, when Trump was, all about like, don't vote early, don't vote by mail, it's all rigged, et cetera, et cetera. That may have single-handedly cost him the election. He has since even backtracked, sort of half-heartedly. Sort of half-heartedly, but realized that this was really a major tactical failure. So Youngkin has tried to reverse this, but yeah, it'll be a very interesting one. And then also, maybe Youngkin, and the reason we say that he wants to focus on abortion is because his aligned PAC made a big ad buy on abortion and has been apparently them and these national anti-abortion groups have been pushing candidates to really talk about it and really include it in their messaging. So we know this has been a big push for him. But then the other question is like, how much does that matter versus the national climate?
Yeah, that's a great point.
You've had a few things. I mean, for one thing, as we just covered with the polls, like it's not going well for Joe Biden. The Democrats doesn't look that great. On the other hand, you also just had Republicans with this whole messy situation with the Speaker of the House that also didn't look great in terms of governance. So that's why these things are interesting from a national perspective, because at this point, so much of politics is national versus local. Whatever little strategy Glenn Youngkin and the Republicans and the Democrats have in terms of the state of Virginia may be completely subsumed by just whatever the national mood is.
Yeah, as we've always talked about, Virginia is such a in many ways gets affected in a lot by these national elections because half the people who live in the North work for the federal government or they work for the federal government and are way more tapped in than the average person. I mean, these people are like constantly reading the news, the most impacted, also love to vote, as I said. So I would put that together. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't know what the hell you were doing going all in on abortion. I think the Glenn Bucks was a better idea. I mean, even if we think about how did Glenn Youngkin get elected? He convinced these Northern Virginia Karens to vote for him because of the school closures. That was a huge part of it, and because of the economy and how it was awful. So what do? You should do that again. You should keep talking about the economic cycle. Lean into I cut you guys a $200 check. We're gonna unleash more jobs or whatever in Virginia. Talking about social issues in a state that's like Biden +8 or something like that just seems like the dumbest possible thing. But
not to mention some of the key seats here, both of the House of Delegates and the state Senate, are in like Loudoun County.
Right.
They're in like the exurbs, exactly the type of voters that would, maybe swayed by the school closure argument, but maybe swayed in the total opposite direction by like, hey, let's do more abortion restrictions. What do you think, guys? So probably, in my personal opinion, probably not the smartest strategy from Mr. Youngkin. I just want to throw out there a couple of the other big elections that are happening tomorrow. We're going to cover some more of these tomorrow with, I believe we have J. Miles Coleman, who's coming in to give us a full breakdown. You do have a few governor's races. The most interesting to me are Kentucky, where you've got a Democrat, Andy Beshear, who's actually really quite popular in the state, but it's still Kentucky. So that one, and he's up against a Republican named Daniel Cameron, who's the current AG. So that one will be really interesting. And then it's almost the flip. You have a very unpopular Republican and Ryan Grimm's doppelganger, Tate Reeves, down in Mississippi, who was caught up in the whole Brett Favre scandal, you guys will remember, facing a relative of Elvis Presley. Wow. Now, I think Reeves is very likely to win. Most of the polling indicates it is, but there was an internal poll that showed it more or less tied, so that one is kind of interesting. There's an abortion initiative on the ballot in Ohio that would enshrine the right to abortion in the state constitution. That one is very interesting in Ohio. We had some early indications we covered previously that seemed like the pro-choice position was sort of overwhelmingly winning there. There's one in Maine that I'm also really interested in where they want to change their utilities to be owned by the public. So some little burgeoning potential socialism there in Maine that has caught my eye as well. So there's a lot. There's other legislatures up on the ballot as well. So there's a lot to dig into. So we'll get into some more of that with Jay Miles tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to do that, especially the Kentucky one. I think that guy's going to run for president someday.
Bashir?
He probably should. I mean, it's like him and Josh Shapiro. I'm looking at those two guys. I'm like, both of these guys are angling for the presidency.
Andy Bashir,
Yeah.
I know him a little bit personally because I used to live in Kentucky. Very nice man. Charisma, not there.
He's popular.
Not there.
He's popular from
But
a red state. Like,
he's yeah, I mean, he's like been very smart in terms of how he's conducted himself. And he's really leaned into, and this might surprise people, but now like being pro-labor is extremely popular. It's always been popular in Kentucky, actually, which is quite a populist state. Coal, they have the Kentucky truck plant, like one of the big Ford truck assembly plants is in Kentucky. They just won some of those new big battery plants. So there's big economic initiatives that Andy's been taking credit for. But again, it's still Kentucky. And this is a state that has moved, you know, very far to the right. Daniel Cameron, I think, has a real shot at it. Polls are sort of like notoriously really wrong in the state of Kentucky. So even though all the polls have showed Andy Bashir with a significant, at times double-digit, lead over Daniel Cameron, you just never know there until Election Day. And the last thing I'll say on this one, and then we can wrap up here, but Kentucky was a real bellwether in terms of the election of Trump. And you had a Democrat just before Trump was elected in 2015. You had a Democrat who, again, was up in the polls consistently. Everybody thought he basically had it in the bag. You might think that's strange, but Kentucky has voted for Democrats at the state level like for a long time. And the Republican, this kind of brash businessman named Matt Bevin, came out of nowhere to win that election. And I'm talking the polls were showing consistent double-digit leads for the Democrat. And that really sort of was a canary in the coal mine for Trump. So anyway, none of this is a guarantee of what the future may hold, but it's always better to hear and see what voters are actually feeling and how they're actually voting. I put a lot more stock in that than what the polls are saying, especially at this point.
Totally.
So that's why we're watching it really closely.
It'll be fun. I'm excited to see it. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We'll have a great show for everybody tomorrow, and we will see you all then.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.